18-year-old dramatically pleaded guilty to all 16 charges against him in a surprise development even the judge was not aware of. Rudakubana, who had a sickening interest in death, knifed 6-year-old BB King, 7-year-old Elsie Stancombe, and 9-year-old Alice de Silva Aguirre to death on July 29th. The monster was first referred to event in 2019 when he was aged just 13 after showing a morbid fascination with a school massacre. Rudakubana, who also researched the 2017 terror attacks in London, was found 3 times not to pose a terrorism risk. Nigel Farage has now accused Sir Keir Starmer and the police of a gigantic cover-up. Mr Farage accused the government of behaving abominably from day one. This comes after the Reform UK leader was blocked from asking questions in Parliament about Rudakubana's background and if he was known to police. He was told this was due to ongoing court proceedings, which the politician branded completely wrong. Mr Farage claimed the riots sparked after the tragedy were a result of withholding of information from the public. The violence was provoked after false rumours were spread that the attacker was an asylum seeker. The spread of misinformation and conspiracy theories on social media, especially X, previously known as Twitter, incited fear and anger among the public, further inflaming tensions. Mr Farage told The Telegraph, "I was pretty certain from what I had been told very early on that this was a terrorist-related attack." The Reform UK leader said he knew shortly after the murders Rudakubana had been expelled from school at the age of 13 for possession of a knife. He said, quote, "This reflects very badly on the Prime Minister. We have been denied the truth on this by the police and the government. It is disgraceful." There has been a gigantic cover-up from day one. The authorities knew very quickly about his expulsion from school, the ricin making and the Al-Qaeda material, yet they refused to class the murders as terror-related for fear of the reaction there might have been. It comes as footage has emerged showing the moment Rudakubana waited for a taxi to take him to the dance class. The teenager can be seen pacing up and down 30 minutes before stabbing 3 girls to death. Our footage was captured outside the home Rudakubana shared with parents and his disabled brother in the quiet village of Banks in Lancashire. The triple killer's taxi driver arrives at around 11:30. He asked the cab.
Keir Starmer said Britain will rightly demand answers after it was revealed Axel Rudakubana had terror links. Sir Keir Starmer has vowed to leave no stone unturned in answering how the state failed to protect the 3 young girls murdered by Axel Rudakubana. The Prime Minister said Britain will rightly demand answers after it was revealed that the Southport killer had previously been referred to the government's counter-terrorism prevent program. Following the 18-year-old's guilty plea on Monday, Sir Keir said his thoughts were with the families of the victims Alice de Silva Aguirre, 9, BB King, 6, and Elsie Stancombe, 7. He added, "The news that the vile and sick Southport killer will be convicted is welcome. It is also a moment of trauma for the nation and there are grave questions to answer as to how the state failed in its ultimate duty to protect these young girls. Britain will rightly demand answers, and we will leave no stone unturned in that pursuit." At the center of this horrific event, there is still a family and community grief that is raw, a pain that not even justice can ever truly heal. It comes after Nigel Farage signaled that Home Secretary Yvette Cooper must appear in Parliament and account for why Rudakubana's terror links were not revealed sooner. Sir Keir Starmer has vowed to leave no stone unturned in answering how the state failed to protect the 3 young girls murdered by Axel Rudakubana. The Prime Minister said Britain will rightly demand answers after it was revealed that the Southport killer had previously been referred to the government's counter-terrorism prevent program. Following the 18-year-old's guilty plea on Monday, Sir Keir said his thoughts were with the families of the victims Alice de Silva Aguirre, 9, BB King, 6, and Elsie Stancombe, 7. He added, "The news that the vile and sick Southport killer will be convicted is welcome. It is also a moment of trauma for the nation and there are grave questions to answer as to how the state failed in its ultimate duty to protect these young girls. Britain will rightly demand answers, and we will leave no stone unturned in that pursuit." At the center of this horrific event, there is still a family and community grief that is raw, a pain that not even justice can ever truly heal. He also admitted production of a biological toxin, ricin, on or before July 29, the date of the attack, and possession of information likely to be useful to a person committing or preparing to commit an act of terrorism. Alice Da Silva Aguirre, B.B. King and Elsie Stankham died following the attack at the Taylor Swift-themed class on a small business park in the seaside town shortly before midday on July 29. The defendant, who was 17 at the time, admitted their murders, as well as the attempted murders of 8 other children, who cannot be named for legal reasons. Class instructor Lean Lucas and businessman John Hayes. Murph Farage said a vacuum of information about the suspect had fueled the riots, and claimed Reform UK had been blocked from asking questions about potential terror links to the attacks in the House of Commons. There was nothing about what I asked that would have in any way threatened contempt of court. This is basic background information that the public was entitled to, he added. Murph Farage continued, I think that the government are responsible for the most astonishing cover-up. I think that we need an apology from the Home Secretary and an explanation as to why we have been denied the basic truth. The Reform leader's cover-up claim relates to Rudakubana's admission he possessed an Al-Qaeda training manual in PDF form, something not revealed in the immediate aftermath of the attack. Asked if he would be calling for the government to address the case in the Commons, Mr. Farage replied, we will, as a party, table an urgent question on this. Absolutely. Tory leader Kemi Badenoch insisted there needs to be a complete account of who in government knew what and when in the case. As we learn more details of Axel Rudakubana's horrific crimes, my thoughts are first and foremost with the victims' families, she said. We will need a complete account of who in government knew what and when. The public deserves a truth. This case is still in court and there are, properly, limits on what can be said at this stage, but once it concludes on Thursday with sentencing, there are many important questions the authorities will need to answer about the handling of this case and the flow of information. The tragic case of Axel Rudakubana, who pleaded guilty to the murders of 3 young girls in Southport, has raised significant concerns about governmental transparency and accountability. Critics, including Nigel Farage, have accused Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer and the police of a gigantic cover-up, alleging that the public was not adequately informed about Rudakubana's background and prior interactions with anti-terrorism programs. Rudakubana, 18, had been referred to the government's anti-extremism program, PREVENT, 3 times between December 2019 and April 2021 due to a fixation with violence. Despite these referrals and his possession of terrorist materials, authorities did not classify the murders as terror-related. This decision has led to public outcry and demands for greater transparency regarding the state's handling of the case.
Lay wounded, and 2 adults were also attacked, including Leanne Lucas, who'd been teaching the group. They were stabbed by a teenager, barely out of childhood himself.
It's that time of year again.
This is Axel Rudakubana dressed as Doctor Who in a 2018 Children in Need promotion. The charity says it has no affiliation with him. Now 18, Rudakubana has pleaded guilty to the murders, attempted murders, and other related charges. The teenager's issues with violence started when he was young. He was expelled from this school at the age of 13, and on one occasion was seen swinging a hockey stick around, breaking another child's wrist and having to be restrained.
Without paying, and walked up the stairs to the yoga workshop. There, he started attacking children. He entered the session at 11:45 a.m. and within seconds, screams could be heard, attracting the attention of passers-by. Chillingly, just 1 week before the attack, Rudakubana is feared to have plotted a similar attack on his old school. He booked a taxi the same way he travelled to the Taylor Swift-themed dance class under a fake name from his home to take him to the Range High School. It's believed he'd been planning to target pupils on the last day of term as they broke up for the summer holidays. But he was stopped from making his journey when his father ran out and intervened. Rudakubana was due to stand trial at Liverpool Crown Court today, charged with 3 counts of murder and 10 counts of attempted murder. He also admitted 2 terror offences, but cops are still not treating the attack as terror-related, despite the previous concerns over his behaviour. Sadly, the victims' families were not in court to see his plea, as it was assumed the trial would officially open tomorrow. The teen was due to stand trial today, where details about the attack would have been heard for the first time in court. As he pleaded guilty, that information will now be revealed on Thursday instead, at his sentencing hearing. Mr. Justice Goose warned Rudakubana it is inevitable he will receive a life sentence. After he admitted his crimes, the Crown Prosecution Service described him as a young man with a sickening and sustained interest in death and violence and said he had shown no signs of remorse. Among the charges were possession of information likely to be useful to a person committing or preparing an act of terrorism, contrary to Section 58 of the Terrorism Act 2000. He also pleaded guilty to one charge of the production of a biological toxin, namely ricin, contrary to Section 1 of the Biological Weapons Act 1974. This relates to an Al-Qaeda manual and ricin that were found at his home following the attack. It was the first time Rudakubana has spoken out loud in court.
In response to these concerns, Prime Minister Starmer has acknowledged that the state failed in its duty to protect the victims and has ordered a public inquiry into the failings that allowed this tragedy to occur. The inquiry aims to examine the actions of various agencies, including the police, Crown Prosecution Service, Home Office, and No. 10. To determine how they handled Rudakubana's case and why they failed to prevent the attack. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper stated that the inquiry would provide more independent answers on both Prevent and all the other agencies that came into contact with this extremely violent teenager. She emphasized the need to understand why the Prevent program concluded that Rudakubana was not a terrorist threat and why he was not advanced to the Channel counter-radicalization stage. The public inquiry is expected to shed light on these issues and address the allegations of a cover-up by providing a comprehensive account of the state's actions leading up to the attack. The government has expressed its commitment to transparency and accountability in this matter, aiming to restore public trust and ensure that such failures do not occur in the future. Rudakubana will be sentenced on Thursday.